This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there.
From Innistrad to Shadowmoor, what spooky top 10 does Nitsuhone have in store?
Hi everyone, I'm Nitsuhone, and it's Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. It's October, and this year that means every Friday MTG Top 10 is Halloween inspired. In past Octobers, I've taken a look at some spooky MTG planes like Innistrad and Shadowmoor. Those are planes that definitely have a claim at the spookiest in the multiverse, but there is another contender, and that's New Phyrexia. New Phyrexia was released in 2011 as the final set in Scars of Mirrodin block. The storyline in that block was that Mirrodin was being taken over by the Phyrexians, who ultimately succeeded in their mission and converted the plane into New Phyrexia. This means the plane is now dominated by grotesque creatures that are part organic and part machine, and it would be a pretty scary place to visit, with horrors around every corner. As we'll see throughout this video, New Phyrexia is a super stacked set. Only 175 cards were in it, but the number 10 card in this video has 74 points, and the top 7 cards all have over 100. Before we get into the list, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in this video, and it has slightly changed recently. A top 8 at a first tier event is worth 2 points. Included in this category are things like Pro Tours, Players Tours, World Championships, Set Championships, Legacy and Vintage Championships, and a top 8 at a second tier event is worth 1 point, and this is Grand Prix, Magic Fests, and Magic Online Showcase Challenges. Alright, let's get to the list. At number 10, it is Phyrexian Metamorph, the first of several cards on this list with the Phyrexian mana mechanic. This powerful mechanic allows you to either pay 2 life or colored mana, so in the case of the Metamorph, that means you pay 3 generic and 2 life to cast it if you want to, and you don't even need blue mana in your deck to do it. The Metamorph has a very nice clone effect. Clones tend to be pretty nice cards in general, since they will always be the best creature on the battlefield. Phyrexian Metamorph adds some extra utility though, because it can also copy artifacts. Plus, the whole Phyrexian mana thing makes it so literally any deck can play it. The Metamorph has seen play in just about every format it's been legal in. In Standard and Modern, it was a pretty nice fit for birthing pod decks, as sometimes tutoring up a clone of your best creature, or your opponent's best creature, was your best move. It could also clone the pod itself if it had to. It also saw play in a pretty wide variety of other standard decks, especially Delver and aggro decks. In Legacy, it's been played in Eldrazi aggro and Painter combo, and in Vintage, it's been played in the artifact-focused Ravager Shops deck. At number 9, it is Vault Scourge, another Phyrexian mana card. The Phyrexian cost here means that the Scourge is pretty much a 1-mana 1/1 with flying and lifelink, and on top of that, it's an artifact. All of that together is a great deal, especially in a deck that can take advantage of all 3 of those things, which has generally been artifact-based aggro decks. Vault Scourge is at its most impressive in modern affinity decks, where it was played alongside Arcbound Ravager and Cranial Plating, both of which are cards that can make the Scourge hit a heck of a lot harder, which of course also means you're gaining a ton of life and making it impossible for an opponent to ever win a race against you. The Scourge has slowed down in Modern though, as affinity decks shifted into hardened Scales decks and then Mox Opal got banned. Vault Scourge is a powerful common, and that has led to it being played in Pauper 2, where it's generally been played in various aggro decks. Because of the Phyrexian mana, literally any aggro deck can play it, and it's going to continue to gain points in Pauper going forward. At number 8, it is Karn Liberated. This 7-mana Planeswalker has a huge effect on the game, since he can immediately exile cards from the battlefield or your opponent's hand. He also has one of the wackiest ultimates around, since he restarts the game, while giving you a significant head start since you get to keep the cards that he exiled. In Standard, he was played in control decks, but he didn't have the most impressive showing there, largely because the format didn't have any good ways to ramp mana. Karn has thrived in Modern though, pretty much from the beginning of the format. This is because 7 colorless mana is the magic number for Tron decks, which can produce that much mana on turn 3 with regularity. If you've never played Modern and faced down a turn 3 Karn Liberated, consider yourself lucky, because it's not a very easy thing to come back from. Karn will continue to gain points, but that's pretty much true of everything on this list, so it may never move any higher. At number 7, it is Torpor Orb. This has been a key sideboard card in many formats because it comes with the ability to shut down enter the battlefield abilities, and that tends to power down a whole lot of creatures. While it's been played in multiple formats, Modern is where it's done the most work by a pretty large margin. It's good against a wide variety of creatures in the format, including basically all of them in Hardened Scales decks, since they tend to be 0/0s that enter the battlefield with +1/+1 counters. It also does a good job against any deck using Primeval Titan. In the past, it was also really good at hating on Birthing Pod and Splinter Twin, both decks that needed Enter the Battlefield triggers to function, but both of those decks did get banned out of the format. Those are, though, just a few examples, and you can see how a card like Torpor Orb is great in the right metagame, and it's going to continue to gain points. At number 6, we return to Phyrexian mana with Gut Shot. 1 mana to do 1 to something isn't especially impressive, but 0 mana to do 1 to something is pretty nice. It also gives non-red decks access to burn, which certainly matters. This has led to it being played in a ton of different decks over the years, sometimes as a main deck card and sometimes in the sideboard in formats with lots of problematic X1s. Basically, it's played a fair bit in all formats and a whole lot in both Modern and Pauper. It will continue to gain points, but it is unlikely to move up the list with what's in front of it. At number 5, it's Batterskull. Batterskull is a great equipment because it comes with Living Weapon. It's basically a 5 mana 4/4 with Vigilance and Lifelink that can return to your hand when you need it to. Now, that on its own wouldn't be super impressive, but Lifelink and Vigilance do pair really well together and are highly effective at countering more aggressive decks. That said, the skull itself probably wouldn't be so good if it weren't for its frequent running mate, Stoneforge Mystic. Those 2 cards have teamed up to gain points in Standard, Modern, Legacy, and even Vintage. The Mystic can search up Batterskull and then cheat it into play early. That is a powerful enough play that ultimately the Mystic got banned out of Standard and Extended, and it was even preemptively banned when Modern was created as a format in 2011. Despite these bans, Batterskull has still gained some significant points in both Modern and Standard, but mostly as a sideboard card against aggressive decks. However, the Mystic was never banned in Legacy, so it amassed a lot of points there, and in 2019 it also got unbanned in Modern, leading to a resurgence for Batterskull. It's still putting up points at a pretty impressive clip. At number 4, it is Surgical Extraction, a Phyrexian mana card that can hate on the graveyard and on specific cards in the opponent's deck. So it can simultaneously deal with graveyard decks and some combo decks. And because it costs Phyrexian mana, it can be played in the sideboard of any deck that needs it. This has led to it having multi-format success, and that's just going to continue. At number 3, it's Spellskite. It comes with the ability to redirect spells and abilities to itself, and you don't even need mana to do it, because once again, this is a card that involves Phyrexian mana. It's one of the most played sideboard cards in multiple formats since it can so effectively mess with so many different strategies. On a basic level, you can use it to protect other creatures by redirecting removal spells to it, but you can also tamper with your opponent's plans if they're a deck interested in putting auras or using combat tricks on their creatures, because you can redirect those types of things to Spellskite too. It has seen the most play in Modern. It used to be one of the best sideboard options against the Splinter Twin combo, since you could redirect the aura onto your Spellskite. Since Twin was banned out of Modern, it hasn't seen as much play, but it still picks up some points every year, as it is useful against decks like Bogles, Burn, and Infect. It's also pretty good in decks like Infect, since you can use it to redirect removal and protect your creatures. At number 2, it is Gitaxian Probe. This is a free cantrip that also gives you information about your opponent's hand. When you have a card like this, it increases the consistency of your deck while also loading your graveyard and being a spell in decks that have synergy for that, and it doing all of that for 0 mana is pretty awesome. It's been a staple in many formats over the years, and it's perhaps the most notable for letting decks that can win the game in a single turn make sure the coast is clear while also drawing them cards. This has been the case in decks like Modern Death Shadow and Infect, as well as Storm decks across multiple formats. So this card may not look like it does a ton, but being free is a really big deal, and it made the card so powerful that it's been banned in Modern, Legacy, and Pauper, and restricted in Vintage. All of that will definitely hinder its score going forward, so it may be one of the few cards on this list that will be moving down in the future. And at number 1, by more than 100 points, it's Dismember, a crazy efficient removal spell. Because of Phyrexian mana, you can potentially only pay a single colorless mana and 4 life to give -5/-5 to anything at instant speed, and that's enough to kill the vast majority of creatures in Magic. Like most of these Phyrexian mana cards, the fact that it is effectively colorless has played a pretty large role in its success, as colors that normally lack super efficient removal options can just run Dismembered, since it fits into any deck. It's been the most prolific in Modern, where it frequently appears in Tron and Death Shadow. Tron decks especially love Dismember because they don't often run a whole lot of colored mana, making it kind of a problem sometimes to play a removal spell that asks for colored mana, but Dismember solves that problem. Even creatures in the Eternal format aren't entirely safe from being dismembered. Eldrazi aggro decks in both of these formats are the most regular home for it these days, as those are also decks that don't run a whole lot of colored mana. Dismember is likely to hold on to its slot as the #1 card on this list for the foreseeable future. Well, those are the 10 cards from new Phyrexia that have left the biggest mark on competitive Magic. If you want to own any of these cards, you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each of them in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others will enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future episodes of this series, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you want to catch up on the over 400 MTG Top 10s you might have missed, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. Lastly, if you want to support the channel, you can on Patreon. Thanks for watching.